A street girl shouted at a millionaire, "Don't eat this, because your wife poisoned it." When he was coming home, he suddenly turned pale and in shock. Maria's stomach growled as she pressed her back against the cold brick wall. The awning above her head dripped water onto her worn sneakers. She pulled her knees closer to her chest and watched the steam rise from the restaurant's kitchen vent across the alley. Fresh truffle pasta, special of the day. The waiter's voice drifted out whenever the heavy glass door swung open. The financial district's morning rush filled the sidewalks with sharp shoes and pressed suits. Maria counted the regulars. The woman with red-bottom heels, who always talked too loud on her phone. The old man with the gold watch who fed pigeons despite the no feeding signs. And the cleaning crew who pretended not to see her when they dumped the trash. Her green eyes tracked movement through the restaurant's windows. The lunch rush would start soon. She'd been living in this spot between two skyscrapers for 8 months now, long enough to memorize every pattern, every schedule. The restaurant door opened. Maria's shoulders tensed. "I don't care if she's been working here for 10 years. Victoria Chun's voice cut through the morning air. "If she can't follow simple instructions, fire her." Victoria's blonde hair caught the sunlight as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Her white dress probably cost more than Maria had ever seen in her life. Behind her, a waitress wiped her eyes with her apron. "Yes, Mrs. Chun." The restaurant manager nodded, his face tight. "It won't happen again." Maria pulled her threadbare jacket tighter. She'd seen Victoria make 3 different servers cry this month alone. The woman moved through the world like she owned it, leaving broken people in her wake. The door opened again. This time, Robert Chun stepped out, adjusting his purple tie. He paused to pull out his wallet. "Here." He pressed something into the crying waitress's hand when Victoria wasn't looking. "Take care of yourself." Maria watched the waitress's eyes widen at whatever he'd given her. Robert did this often. Small acts of kindness when his wife wasn't watching. It made him different from the others who treated the homeless and service workers like they were invisible. The clock on the bank building showed 11:45, a minute on schedule. Robert would return for lunch at 1 p.m. He always ate here on Wednesdays. Maria's attention snapped to movement in the alley. A man in a dark coat slipped through the service entrance. She'd never seen him before, but something about the way he moved made her skin prickle. She crept closer, keeping to the shadows. The man met Victoria by the dumpsters. "Did you bring what I asked for?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "The insurance policy is ironclad," the man replied. "Once it's done, you'll get everything. But my services aren't cheap. Money isn't an issue." Victoria pulled an envelope from her purse. "Just make sure it can't be traced." Maria's heart pounded against her ribs. She pressed herself flat against the wall as Victoria's heels clicked past her hiding spot. The man in the coat followed a moment later, pausing briefly. His eyes swept the alley. Maria held her breath until he disappeared around the corner. She'd learned long ago that people rarely looked down at the street level. They didn't notice the girl in the shadows, the one who collected cans from the trash and sometimes got leftover food from the kind kitchen staff. But she noticed everything, and what she'd just heard made her stomach twist worse than hunger ever had. The next hour crawled by. Maria watched Victoria return twice more, slipping into the kitchen when the head chef was on his smoke break. Each time, she carried a small purse that hadn't been there before. At 12:55 p.m., Robert's regular table was being set. The same table he used every Wednesday by the window with the view of the park. Maria's palms were sweating. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed made her feel sick. Victoria wanted her husband dead. And from the looks of it, today was the day she planned to do it. Maria hugged her knees tighter, rocking slightly. No one would believe a street kid. She was 12, homeless, dirty. To most people, she didn't even exist. But Robert had existed to her. He'd seen her, He even smiled at her once when he caught her watching him. He didn't deserve what was coming. The restaurant door opened again. Robert Chun stepped out of his car, checking his watch. Maria's heart hammered in her chest. She had about 30 seconds to decide: stay invisible and safe, or risk everything to warn him. She looked down at her dirty clothes, her shaking hands. Then she looked at Robert straightening his purple tie as he reached for the restaurant door. Maria stood up. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. Her mother used to say, back when she had a mother, back when she had anything at all to lose. Her legs felt like lead as she forced them to move. The restaurant door had never looked so heavy. Behind her, Victoria's heels clicked on the sidewalk. Time was up. Maria grabbed the door handle and pulled. The blast of warm air hit Maria's face as she stepped into the restaurant. Conversation stopped. Forks clattered against plates. A hostess stepped forward, her plastic smile faltering. "I'm sorry, but you can't be in here," the hostess said, reaching for Maria's shoulder. "I'll have to ask you to wait." Maria ducked under her arm. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she scanned the room. Robert hadn't sat down yet. He was still speaking with the Mater D. Victoria appeared in the doorway behind her. "What is that creature doing in my restaurant?" Maria's throat closed up. The words stuck like broken glass. She forced them out anyway. "Don't eat here today," she blurted. Her voice cracked. "The food, it's not safe." Security was already moving toward her. Two men in black suits, earpieces gleaming. "Your wife," Maria's voice rose as hands grabbed her arms. "I heard her talking about insurance money. She's been going into the kitchen when no one's looking. She's going to, that's enough." Victoria's voice cut through the restaurant like a whip. "Robert, surely you're not listening to this. This vagrant's absurd accusations?" Robert stood frozen, his face unreadable. The security guards lifted Maria off her feet. "Please," Maria kicked against their grip. "Check the kitchen. She's been meeting with a man in a dark coat. They talked about making it look like an accident." "Get her out of here," Victoria snapped, "and call the police. I want her arrested for trespassing." The guards dragged Maria toward the door. She caught a glimpse of Robert's face. Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt? Recognition? She couldn't tell. Then she was outside, hitting the concrete hard. Her palms scraped against the sidewalk. "Don't come back," one guard warned. "Next time we won't be so gentle." Maria scrambled to her feet. Her hands were bleeding, but she barely felt it. She ran to her spot under the awning, grabbing her small backpack, everything she owned in the world stuffed into one torn bag. She couldn't stay here now. Victoria would make sure of that. As she hurried down the alley, a memory hit her like a physical blow. 3 years ago, her mother's apartment. The smell of burnt toast and coffee. "Finish your breakfast, Maria," her mother had said, adjusting her nurse's uniform. "I'll be home late tonight." Double shift. That was the last time she'd seen her mother. The car accident happened that afternoon. After that came the foster homes, the running away, the streets. Maria shook her head, forcing herself back to the present. She couldn't think about that now. She needed to move. But where? The financial district had been her home for almost a year. She knew which restaurants threw away good food, which security guards could be trusted, which doorways were safe to sleep in. A black car with tinted windows rolled slowly past her. Maria ducked behind a dumpster. Her mind raced back over the past week. The first time she'd noticed something wrong was last Wednesday. Victoria had arrived early, before the lunch rush. Maria had watched her argue with someone on her phone. "I don't care what it takes. I want it done before the board meeting next month. No, it has to look natural." The insurance company. Then Victoria had spotted her and moved out of earshot. The next day, the man in the dark coat appeared. Maria had watched 3 meetings from her hiding spot. "The powder is undetectable," he'd said during the second meeting. It'll look like heart failure, and the policy pays double for accidental death? Victoria had asked. Maria's hands shook as she peeked around the dumpster. The black car was gone, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She needed proof. No one would take her word alone. She was just a street kid. But maybe if she could get evidence. The discarded phone she'd found last week still had some battery. She pulled it from her bag, checking that it still turned on. Footsteps echoed down the alley. Maria pressed herself against the wall. "Find that girl." Victoria's voice carried around the corner. "I don't care what it takes." She can't be allowed to interfere. Maria held her breath as two sets of footsteps passed her hiding spot. What if she talks to the police? A man's voice asked. Victoria's laugh was cold. Who would believe her? She's nothing. Nobody. Make sure she understands that. The footsteps faded. Maria's legs were shaking so bad she had to sit down. She'd thought she had nothing left to lose. She'd been wrong. Now she had a choice. Run and hide, try to survive somewhere else, or stay and fight. Gather evidence, find a way to prove what she knew. The phone felt heavy in her hand. Its camera still worked. Above her, the restaurant's kitchen vent continued pumping out steam. Somewhere inside, Victoria was probably already planning her next move. Maria checked the time, 1:30 p.m. Robert would be eating right now. Had Victoria already put something in his food, or was that planned for another day? A rat scurried past her feet, making her jump. The creature paused, whiskers twitching, then disappeared into a drain pipe. Maria envied its ability to move unseen. She needed to become like that, invisible but watching, gathering proof. She pulled her backpack closer, taking inventory. The phone, half a sandwich saved from yesterday, a bottle of water, and an old notebook she'd found in the trash. Not much, but it would have to do. The sound of breaking glass made her flinch. Voices echoed from the restaurant's kitchen. "I don't care what you thought you saw." Victoria's voice carried through the vent. "That girl is not to be allowed near this restaurant again. Am I clear?" "Yes, Mrs. Chun," a kitchen worker replied. Maria pressed the phone's power button, checking the battery, 62%. Enough to record evidence if she was careful. She thought about Robert's kind eyes, the way he treated people with dignity even when no one was watching, the way he'd slipped money to that crying waitress. The right thing would be to run, to save herself. But Maria was tired of running. She'd lost her mother, her home, her childhood. But she hadn't lost her conscience. Not yet. The phone's camera made a soft click as she tested it. The screen showed a clear view of the kitchen door. Now all she had to do was wait, watch, and gather proof. Even if it cost her everything she had left. Rain pelted the sidewalk outside Luigi's restaurant. Maria huddled deeper under a cardboard box, her eyes fixed on the service entrance. 6 days had passed since her warning. 6 days of watching, waiting, documenting. The phone in her pocket had captured 3 more meetings between Victoria and the man in the dark coat. But the battery was almost dead, now minus 15% left. Tomorrow's the day, she'd overheard Victoria say yesterday. The board meeting's on Thursday. It has to be done before then. A police car cruised by, its lights off. Maria pulled back into the shadows. Victoria had made good on her threat. 3 different officers had questioned local businesses about the homeless girl causing trouble. The old Maria would have run by now, but something had changed inside her that first day in the restaurant. She couldn't unknow what she knew. Couldn't unsee what she'd seen. Got any spare change? A gruff voice made her jump. Old Pete, another street regular, stood nearby, his shopping cart rattling with empty cans. "Nothing today," Maria whispered. "Pete, you should go. It's not safe here anymore." He squinted at her through the rain. "Heard you caused quite a stir last week. That business, getting involved with rich folks, Problems. I didn't have a choice. Always got a choice. Kid. He pushed his cart forward. Smart choice is to disappear. Maria watched him shuffle away. Maybe he was right. But then she thought about the powder she'd seen Victoria pass to one of the kitchen staff yesterday. About Robert's Wednesday lunch routine. About her mother, who'd always taught her that doing nothing in the face of wrong was the same as doing wrong yourself. The back door of the restaurant opened. Maria pressed record on the phone. "Everything's ready," the kitchen worker said, taking an envelope from Victoria. "Just like you asked." "Good. Make sure it goes in his usual order." "The beef bourguignon. What about the girl?" "She's still hanging around. She won't be a problem after today. I've made arrangements." The door closed. Maria's hands shook as she saved the video. Battery, 12%. Morning light was starting to break through the rain clouds. Wednesday, Robert's regular lunch day. Maria had all the proof she needed now. Videos, photos, recorded conversations. But her phone was dying, and she had no way to charge it. She needed to act today. The breakfast crowd started arriving at 7 and Maria watched the staff enter. Counting faces she knew. Marco the line cook, who sometimes gave her leftover bread. Sarah the hostess, who'd let her use the bathroom once during a storm. They were good people. They didn't deserve to get caught in this. At 8 a.m. Victoria arrived early, carrying a small black purse she'd never seen before. At 9 a.m., the man in the dark coat made a brief appearance, speaking to Victoria in the alley for exactly 3 minutes. At 10 a.m., Maria saw the kitchen worker from last night adding something to a sealed container in the prep area. The morning crept by. Every minute felt like an hour. Maria's stomach twisted with hunger and fear. She thought about trying to warn Robert outside the restaurant again, but Victoria had hired extra security. They patrolled the sidewalk regularly, watching for her. 11:30 a.m. The lunch rush began. Maria's phone battery dropped to 8%. She had one chance to get this right. The videos had to be sent before the phone died. But to who? The police wouldn't believe her. The restaurant staff were too scared of Victoria. Local news maybe? But would they take a homeless kid seriously? A familiar car pulled up to the curb. Robert Chun stepped out, adjusting his purple tie, the same one he'd worn last week. Maria's heart pounded. Now or never. She opened her Maps app, finding the address for the local newspaper. It was 6 blocks away. The phone dropped to 7%. Robert was almost at the restaurant door. Maria stood up, her legs cramping from sitting so long. The security guards were distracted by a delivery truck. 6% battery. She had to choose. Try to warn Robert again and probably fail, or run to the newspaper office and hope they'd look at her evidence before the phone died. Robert reached for the door handle. Maria's feet moved before her brain had finished deciding. She burst from her hiding spot, sprinting toward him. "MR, Chun, wait." Security turned. Victoria appeared in the doorway. 5% battery. Robert paused, his hand on the door. Maria reached him just as the guards started moving. She pulled out the phone. "Your wife is trying to kill you," she gasped. "I have proof. Look." She thrust the phone toward him. Videos already queued up 0.4% battery. Victoria's voice cut through the air. "Remove that girl immediately." But Robert had already taken the phone. His eyes widened as he watched the screen. "Robert, don't listen to this nonsense." Victoria stepped forward. She's clearly disturbed. 3% battery. The security guards grabbed Maria's arms. "The beef bourguignon," Maria shouted as they dragged her back. "She put something in it." "Check the kitchen." 2% battery. Robert's face had gone pale. He looked from the phone to his wife. "Victoria?" His voice was very quiet. "What is this?" 1% battery. Maria saw Victoria's mask crack for just a moment. Saw the flash of panic in her eyes. The phone screen went black, but Robert was already turning away from the restaurant, pulling out his own phone. "Get my lawyer," she heard him say as the security guards dragged her around the corner. "And the police." Now, Maria's head hit the pavement hard. Stars exploded behind her eyes. "You've made a big mistake," one guard growled. But through the pain and fear, Maria felt something unfamiliar. Hope. She'd done what she had to do. The rest was up to Robert now. The world started to fade at the edges as she heard sirens in the distance. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was Victoria's face, twisted with rage as Robert held up the dead phone like a shield between them. Then, nothing. Maria woke to the taste of blood in her mouth. Her head throbbed where it had hit the pavement. She was still in the alley, but something was different. Voices echoed from the street, lots of them. She pushed herself up on shaky arms. Her vision swam. "Search the kitchen," a man's voice ordered. "Every container, every surface. And someone find that chef." Maria crawled to the corner of the building, peering around. Red and blue lights flashed against the restaurant's windows. 3 police cars blocked the street. A small crowd had gathered behind yellow tape. Robert Chun stood talking to 2 detectives. He still held Maria's dead phone. Victoria was nowhere in sight. "There she is." Someone spotted her. Heavy boots approached. Maria tried to run, but her legs wouldn't work right. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders, but gently this time. "Easy, kid." A female police officer knelt beside her. "You took quite a hit. We need to get you checked out." "The phone," Maria croaked. "The videos, Mr. Chun showed us. Paramedics are on their way." The officer helped her sit up. The world spun. Inside the restaurant, chaos erupted. The double doors burst open as people rushed out. "Clear the building." A man in a hazmat suit appeared. "Potential toxic substance found in the kitchen. Everyone out, now." Customers streamed onto the sidewalk. Wait staff, kitchen workers, managers, all evacuating in a panic. "They found something in a sealed container," the officer explained, seeing Maria's questioning look. "Some kind of powder. Lab's testing it now." Maria's vision started to clear. She saw Robert Chun pointing out specific kitchen staff to the detectives. The worker who'd taken Victoria's envelope was already in handcuffs. "Where's Victoria?" Maria asked. The officer's face hardened. "She tried to leave through the back when we arrived. Didn't get far." A commotion near the second police car drew Maria's attention. Victoria Chen was arguing with 2 officers, her perfect hair now disheveled. "This is ridiculous." Her voice carried across the street. "You can't possibly believe the word of some homeless child over me. Do you know who I am?" "Mrs. Chun," one detective approached, holding up an evidence bag. "Would you care to explain why we found this in your purse?" Even from a distance, Maria could see Victoria's face go pale. "I've never seen that before," she stammered. "Someone must have planted it. Along with the texts on your phone discussing the insurance policy? And the security footage of your meetings in the alley?" Victoria's mask finally cracked completely. She lunged at Robert, who stood nearby. "You ruined everything." She screamed as officers held her back. "We could have had it all. The company, the money, everything." Robert just watched, his face stone cold as they handcuffed his wife. The paramedics arrived. Maria tried to wave them off, but the female officer insisted. "You probably have a concussion," she said. "Let them check you out." As they loaded her into the ambulance, Maria caught snippets of conversation. Found 3 different toxins in the kitchen. Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance policy worth millions. Premeditated. Robert Chun appeared at the ambulance door. He looked older somehow, his face lined with exhaustion. "Thank you," he said simply. "You saved my life." Maria tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her drained. "We'll need her statement," a detective said from behind Robert. Later, the paramedic interrupted. She needs medical attention first. The ambulance doors closed. Through the window, Maria watched the scene recede. The crowd of onlookers, the police cars, Robert Chun standing alone on the sidewalk holding her dead phone. The restaurant that had been her home for so long grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared around a corner. "You did good, kid," the paramedic said, checking her pupils. "Real good." Maria closed her eyes. Everything hurt. "What happens now?" she whispered. No one answered. Maybe they didn't hear her, or maybe they just didn't know. The ambulance wove through traffic, sirens silent now. Maria felt every bump and turn. She thought about her spot under the awning, about old Pete's warning to disappear, about her mother's voice. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. But she was alive. Robert was alive. Victoria couldn't hurt anyone anymore. Maybe that was enough. The ambulance turned another corner. Maria heard one paramedic radio ahead. 12-year-old female, probable concussion, possible child services case. Child services. The words sent a chill through her. She'd run from them before, but now she was hurt, exhausted, and had nowhere left to hide. Through the ambulance window, she watched the city pass by. The financial district's gleaming towers gave way to older buildings, then to the hospital's stark walls. The right thing had cost her everything: her home, her safety, her anonymity. She just hoped it had been worth it. The ambulance stopped. The doors opened onto organized chaos. Doctors, nurses, stretchers, machines beeping. "Incoming," a nurse called out. "Pediatric trauma." As they wheeled her inside, Maria caught one last glimpse of the city through the hospital doors. Somewhere out there, Victoria Chun was in handcuffs. Somewhere, Robert Chen was alive because a homeless girl had refused to stay invisible. The hospital doors closed. Maria let herself fade into unconsciousness as voices swirled around her. "Start a CT scan. Contact social services. Get me her vital signs. Does anyone know her last name?" The darkness was almost welcome now. She'd done what she had to do. Whatever came next would have to wait until she woke up. The hospital discharge papers said Maria Doe. 3 days, 12 tests, and countless questions later. They still didn't know her real name. She hadn't given it. "You have to go with them," the social worker said, nodding toward the couple from child services. "It's for your own good." Maria sat on the hospital bed, wearing donated clothes that smelled like fabric softener. Her head still ached where she'd hit it, but the dizziness was gone. Through the window, she could see news vans parked outside. The story had exploded. Homeless child foils murder plot. Everyone wanted interviews. She'd refused them all. "There's a nice group home in Southside," the woman from child services said. Her badge read Mrs. Reynolds. "Other kids your age. 3 meals a day. School." Maria's fingers twisted in the clean sheets. She'd been in group homes before. They all started the same way. Promises, rules, structure. They all ended the same way too, with her running. "If you run," Mrs. Reynolds said, reading her mind, "we'll find you. The whole city knows your face now." It was true. The security footage from Luigi's restaurant had been all over the news. Maria had seen herself on the TV in her hospital room. A small, dirty figure sprinting toward Robert Chun. Phone held out like a weapon. The door opened. A detective entered, the same one from the restaurant. "Interview room's ready," he said. "We need your official statement." Maria followed him down sterile hallways. A new sneakers, donated by hospital staff, squeaked on the linoleum. The interview room was small. A camera blinked in one corner. "Start from the beginning," the detective said. "When did you first notice something was wrong?" Maria told them everything. The overheard conversations, the meetings in the alley, the powder in the kitchen. "And you got all this on video?" The phone died, she said. But Mr. Chun saw it first. Lucky for him. The detective made notes. Mrs. Chun confessed this morning. The powder was a rare toxin, untraceable in autopsy. Would have looked like heart failure. Maria's stomach churned. The kitchen worker rolled on her too. He continued, said she paid him $10,000 to spike Mr. Chun's food. Lab confirmed it was the same toxin we found in her purse. More questions followed. Hours of them. Maria's head throbbed. Finally, they let her go. Mrs. Reynolds waited outside. Time to go, she said firmly. Maria looked down the long hospital hallway. 3 orderlies by the elevator. Security guard at the entrance, no way out. The group home was exactly as she'd expected. Gray walls, metal beds, kids with hollow eyes. "You're the one from the news," a girl whispered at dinner. "The one who caught that rich lady." Maria picked at her food. Real food. Hot food. Her stomach should have been grateful. "Lights out at 9, the house mother announced. No talking after dark. In her narrow bed, Maria listened to the unfamiliar sounds. Snoring, crying, the house settling. She waited until the night staff changed shifts at 2 on mine. The window wasn't even locked. They hadn't expected someone her size to try a second-story escape. Her head hurt as she climbed down the drain pipe, but she managed. The streets were quiet here in Southside, different from downtown. She walked all night, staying in shadows. By dawn, she was back in familiar territory, the financial district. Luigi's restaurant was dark, closed pending investigation. Crime scene tape crossed the doors. Maria's spot under the awning was gone. Construction barriers blocked the space between buildings. No trespassing signs everywhere. She kept walking. The morning crowd started flowing into the streets. Same sharp suits, same expensive shoes. But now they looked at her differently. Some recognized her from the news. "Isn't that the girl? The one who saved that businessman? Should we call someone?" Maria ducked into an alley. Her safe invisibility was gone. Old Pete's cart rattled nearby. "Told you to disappear," he said when he saw her. "Whole city's looking for you now. I need a place to sleep," she said. "Just for a few days." He shook his head. "Can't help you. Police been asking questions. Social workers too. Better move on." She tried other spots she knew. Behind the deli, the loading dock at the bookstore, the alcove near the bank. At each place, the same story. No room. Too risky. Move on. By nightfall, she was exhausted. Her head pounded. The hospital food felt like a distant dream. A black car crawled past. Maria pressed against the wall. Not Victoria. She was in jail. But maybe someone connected to her. Someone angry about a rich woman brought down by a street kid. The car passed. Maria breathed again. She found a cardboard box behind a dumpster. Not safe, but she couldn't walk anymore. Rain started falling. The cardboard wouldn't last long. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, her mother had said. Maria hadn't understood then. She did now. She'd saved a man's life, stopped a murder, done the right thing, and now she had less than nothing. No shelter, no allies, no anonymity. Even the streets had turned against her. The rain soaked through the cardboard. Maria hugged her knees, shivering. A police car rolled by, spotlight sweeping the alley. She pressed deeper into the shadows. The right thing had cost everything. But somewhere out there, Robert Chun was alive. Victoria was in jail. Justice had been served. Maria closed her eyes, trying to find comfort in that thought. The rain kept falling. Dawn broke over wet streets. Maria's clothes were still damp from the night's rain. 3 days had passed since she'd escaped a group home. 3 days of running, hiding, searching for safe places to sleep. Her stomach growled. The dumpster behind Chun's favorite restaurant used to be reliable for leftovers. Now it was locked. crime scene tape still fluttering in the morning breeze. Movement caught her eye. A figure in a hoodie was watching her from across the street. Maria's muscles tensed. She'd noticed them yesterday too. People watching, following. Some were police, others, she wasn't sure. She turned down an alley, purposely choosing the narrowest path. Big men couldn't follow easily through tight spaces. The sound of footsteps followed. Maria broke into a run. Pain shot through her head. The concussion wasn't fully healed, but fear pushed her forward. A chain-link fence blocked the alley. Maria's fingers found the holes, muscle memory from years on the street taking over. She scaled it in seconds. The follower was closer now. Male, athletic. He reached the fence just as she dropped to the other side. "Wait," he called. "I just want to talk." Maria ran harder. Her lungs burned. She cut through a construction site, ducking under equipment, past a coffee shop where she used to get day-old muffins, around the corner where she slammed into someone. "Got you," a woman's voice said, grabbing her arm. Maria twisted, ready to bite, kick, anything to get free. "Hey, easy." The woman held up a press badge. "I'm a reporter. Jenny Chun from the Herald." "Chun?" Maria froze. "No relation to Robert," Jenny said quickly. "Look, I just want to talk." "Your story." Maria wrenched free and ran. 2 more blocks. Her vision was blurring. She needed to rest, to think. Something caught her foot. She stumbled, catching herself against a dumpster. Her hand touched something smooth. A phone. New model, cracked screen, but still working. Maria grabbed it. These streets had taught her to take opportunities when they appeared. She wedged herself behind the dumpster, examining her find. Battery at 85%. No service, but the camera worked. Footsteps approached. Maria held her breath. "Lost her," a man's voice said. "Call it in." "Copy that." Social services wants her back in custody ASAP. The footsteps faded. Maria checked the phone again. The camera quality was good, really good. A plan started forming. She thought about Victoria's face when the police caught her, about the evidence that had brought her down, about all the other Victorias out there, thinking they could hurt people and get away with it because no one was watching. But Maria was always watching. She pulled up the camera app, testing the zoom. From her hiding spot, she could clearly see the street. A man in an expensive suit was yelling at a homeless veteran. Click. A shop owner was throwing away perfectly good food while hungry kids watched. Click. A security guard was roughing up a teenage boy for no reason. Click. The phone had no service, but it had Wi-Fi. Maria knew places to get free signals. Cafes, libraries, hotel lobbies. She could document everything. Build evidence. Show people what really happened in these streets. Her head still hurt, but the pain felt distant now. She had a purpose. A siren wailed nearby. Maria pressed deeper into her hiding spot. The phone buzzed. Auto backup was trying to sync to the cloud. Maria's eyes widened. The previous owner's account was still logged in. She opened the backup folder. Hundreds of photos uploaded instantly to a public cloud drive. "Sometimes the right thing finds its own way," her mother used to say. Maria smiled for the first time in days. She wasn't powerless anymore. She had a weapon, truth, captured in pixels. The morning crowd was picking up. Maria watched through the camera lens as a businessman knocked over a homeless woman's cup of change. Click. A cop was harassing a street vendor with proper permits. Click. Victoria's friends were still out there, still hurting people, still thinking no one would catch them. But Maria had learned something important. Evidence was power. She found a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi. Ordered a small coffee with change scrounged from gutters. The barista gave her a suspicious look, but took her money. The photos uploaded one by one. Maria created a new email account, found local news addresses, social justice organizations. Police oversight committees. She attached photos. Added dates, times, locations. Send. 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 Her coffee grew cold as she worked. The shop got crowded. "You can't stay here all day," the manager finally said. Maria nodded, already packed up. She'd learned to move fast. Outside, 2 police cars cruised past, looking for her, but she wasn't running anymore. She had work to do. The phone's battery dropped to 60%. She needed to find another Wi-Fi spot soon. A commotion drew her attention. Across the street, one of Victoria's old friends, another rich woman who'd frequented Luigi's, was berating a janitor. Maria raised the phone. Click. The truth couldn't hide anymore. Neither could she, but maybe that was okay. Sometimes being seen was better than being invisible. Sometimes the right thing meant standing your ground. The phone buzzed with an incoming email. One of the organizations had responded. "We're interested in your photos. Can we meet?" Maria typed back. "Not yet, but I'll keep sending evidence." She signed it. The girl who watches. Another police car rolled past. Maria slipped into an alley, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had purpose now, and she had proof. 2 weeks since Victoria's arrest, Maria's photos had started making waves. Small ones at first, rippling through local news sites and social media. Anonymous watchdog exposes financial district abuse mystery. Photographer documents street-level corruption. The girl who watches, vigilante or vandal. Maria sat in her new spot, a forgotten maintenance alcove high up in a parking garage. The phone's battery held steady at 40%. She'd found a loose outlet to charge it at night. She flipped through her latest captures. A bank manager throwing hot coffee at a sleeping homeless man. Security guards accepting bribes to harass street vendors. Victoria's old friends holding secret meetings in back alleys. The trial date was set. Victoria Chen would face attempted murder charges next month. The kitchen worker had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify. But that wasn't enough anymore. Maria's head still ached sometimes, a reminder of that day at Luigi's. But her vision was clearer than ever. Movement caught her eye. Through the camera's zoom, she spotted 2 familiar faces entering a coffee shop. The private investigator who'd helped Victoria, meeting with another wealthy woman. Click, click, click. Their lips were easy to read through the window. Another inconvenient husband. Same method as Victoria's plan. Insurance policy in place. Maria's hands shook as she uploaded the photos. Another murder plot. Another Victoria. She'd learned from last time. Direct confrontation was too dangerous, but evidence, properly placed, could do the work for her. The phone buzzed. An email from her most reliable contact, a reporter at the Herald. Photos received. Police raid planned for tonight. Stay safe, Maria smiled. The system was working. A police car circled the parking garage. They were still looking for her, but half-heartedly now. Too busy with the cases she kept exposing. She checked her cloud drive. Hundreds of photos organized by date, time, location. Each one a story. Each one evidence. The wealthy woman and investigator left the coffee shop. Maria followed from above, jumping between buildings she'd mapped out weeks ago. Her body had grown stronger despite the limited food. Purpose was better fuel than bread. They turned down an alley. Maria was ready. Click. Money changing hands. Click. Documents being passed. Click. A vial of something clear and deadly. Upload. Send. Wait. Within an hour, police cars screamed past her perch. The wealthy woman's face appeared on local news alerts. Socialite arrested in murder plot. Maria felt no satisfaction, just quiet certainty. The work continued. Night fell. She made her way to the library's outer wall, catching their Wi-Fi signal. Time to review the day's evidence. A shadow moved behind her. Maria spun, ready to run. but the figure raised empty hands. "Been looking for you," old Pete said quietly. "Got some news you should hear." She didn't lower her guard. "What news?" "Victoria's friends are offering money. Big money. To anyone who can find you." "Why?" "You're hurting their business, their reputation, their power." He paused. "They're scared of you, kid." Maria thought about the photos in her cloud drive, about all the evidence she'd gathered. "Good," she said. Pete shook his head. "Ain't good. They're desperate. Desperate rich folks are dangerous." As if to prove his point, 2 black SUVs rolled past the library. "Thanks for the warning," Maria said, already mapping escape routes. "There's a shelter in Westside," Pete offered. "Safe place. Off the grid." But Maria wasn't looking for safe anymore. Safe meant invisible. Safe meant silent. She tried that. It hadn't worked. The phone buzzed again. Another tip from another street person. Victoria's lawyer meeting sketchy guys behind courthouse. Maria checked her battery. 35%. Enough for a few more hours. "Be careful," Pete called as she disappeared into the shadows. The courthouse was quiet this late. Maria stuck to the rooftops, using fire escapes and drainage pipes like highways. Victoria's lawyer stood in the loading dock, talking to men who moved like soldiers. Click, click, click. Their words carried up to her perch. "Find the girl. Silence her permanently. Make it look like an accident." Maria's heart pounded, but her hands stayed steady on the camera. Upload. Send. Wait. Police sirens within minutes. She was getting better at this. Faster. Smarter. The lawyer and soldiers scattered. But Maria had their faces, their license plates, their patterns. Evidence. Always evidence. Her mother's voice echoed. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone. But Maria wasn't alone anymore. She had allies, reporters, honest cops, street people tired of being invisible. The phone dropped to 30%. Time to move. Always moving. But moving forward now, not running away. Victoria's friends could hunt her. The police could search. She'd learned the most important lesson. Truth was a weapon that worked in any direction. Up on the rooftops, in forgotten corners, behind dumpsters and walls. She'd keep watching, keep documenting. The girl they couldn't catch. The girl who caught them instead. Another tip buzzed in. Corporate meeting. Back room. Plans for illegal evictions. Maria checked her battery, calculated angles, mapped routes. The hunt continued. But now she was the hunter. The courthouse loomed against the morning sky. Victoria Chen's trial had drawn crowds. Reporters, protesters, curious onlookers. Maria watched from her hidden perch across the street. 3 weeks of evidence gathering had led to this moment. Her phone was charged to 100% battery, ready to document everything. She'd learned to be prepared. Robert Chun arrived first, looking older than she remembered. He spoke briefly to reporters. Justice will be served. The truth came from an unexpected guardian angel. I hope she's safe. Wherever she is. Maria zoomed in, capturing his face. Not for evidence this time. Just to remember. Victoria arrived next, in handcuffs. Her designer clothes replaced by prison orange. Her perfect hair flat and graying. Click. The crowd surged forward. Maria's lens caught everything. Victoria's lawyer, nervous after his own criminal charges. A kitchen worker, ready to testify. The private investigator, also in cuffs, making a deal. Victoria's friends, watching from expensive cars. Plotting Maria had files on all of them now. Evidence of their own crimes, ready to release. The trial began. Maria couldn't go inside, too risky, but her network kept her informed. Victoria pleading not guilty. Kitchen worker telling everything. Forensics confirmed the poison. Her phone buzzed. A new tip. 2 men asking questions at homeless camps. Looking for you? Armed. Maria checked her escape routes. always prepared now. The men appeared below, expensive suits hiding shoulder holsters. Victoria's last defenders, hunting the girl who'd exposed their world. Click, 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 upload, send. Police responded within minutes. The men disappeared into waiting cars, but Maria had their faces, their license plates, their connections, more evidence. Always more evidence. The trial broke for lunch. Maria used the courthouse's Wi-Fi to check news updates. Victoria Chen defense crumbling, murder plot exposed by homeless hero, financial district corruption under investigation. Her photos had started something bigger than Victoria. The whole system was being exposed, one image at a time. Movement caught her eye. Robert Chen, alone, walking to his car. For a moment, Maria wanted to reveal herself, to hear him say, "Thank you again." But she stayed hidden. She wasn't that frightened girl anymore, running into restaurants to shout warnings. She was something else now, something stronger. The afternoon session began. Maria's network buzzed with updates. Verdict coming. Victoria breaking down. Justice. She waited as the crowd erupted. Victoria Chen, guilty on all charges. Through her lens, Maria watched Victoria's face crumple as they led her away. Click. The last photo she'd ever need of Victoria Chen, but not the last photo she'd take. Her phone filled with tips. Corporate fraud at First National. Police brutality behind Station 12. More murder plots in progress. The work wasn't finished. Maybe it never would be. Robert Chen stood on the courthouse steps, talking to reporters. The system worked, thanks to one brave girl. She taught us to see what we've been ignoring. I hope she knows she made a difference. Maria smiled. She knew. The sun set over the financial district. From her high perch, Maria could see it all. The restaurants where hungry people were turned away. The alleys where the powerful made dirty deals. The shadows where the invisible tried to survive. Her phone buzzed again. Another tip. Another crime. Another chance for justice. She checked her battery. 95%. Reviewed her evidence folder. Organized. Backed up. Ready mapped her escape routes. Clear in all directions. The girl they couldn't catch was going hunting again. Because sometimes justice wore rags instead of robes. Sometimes truth came from shadows instead of light. Sometimes the smallest people made the biggest changes. Click. 1 year after Victoria Chen's conviction, the financial district had changed. Maria sat on her new perch, a converted maintenance room high in an abandoned building. She'd made it comfortable. Sleeping bag, battery-powered lamp, food stash. Most importantly, a clear view of the streets below. Her original phone had been replaced by 3 newer ones, all found with working cameras, each backed up to secure clouds, each telling its own stories. On her wall, newspaper clippings tracked her impact. Financial district corruption ring exposed. Street-level justice. The girl, Change the System anonymous watchdog, continues to guard city streets. The latest headline made her smile. Victoria Chen denied appeal. 25-year sentence upheld. Robert Chen had transformed his company, implementing programs to help the homeless. Maria watched through her lens as new shelters opened, job training centers expanded. She hadn't spoken to him since that day at Luigi's. Didn't need to. Her work spoke for her. Movement caught her eye. Through the camera, she zoomed in on a familiar face. Old Pete, no longer pushing a cart. He worked at one of the new centers now, helping others find their way off the streets. The girl changed everything. She'd overheard him tell newcomers. Showed us we weren't powerless. Maria checked her main phone. 90% battery. Her network had grown. Honest cops, ethical reporters, reformed street people. All feeding her information. All helping expose corruption. A message buzzed in. New shelter opening today. Your old spot between the buildings. Maria zoomed in on the location. Where cardboard and desperation had once lived, a clean building now stood. Its sign read, "Maria's Place. Everyone deserves to be seen." They'd named it after her, the girl they couldn't catch. She smiled but kept working. Another message lit up her screen. Suspicious meeting behind new shelter. Men with guns. Click. Click. The photos flowed to her contacts. Police responded within minutes. She'd learned to work with the system, not just expose it. Change from within and without. More messages poured in. Drug deal at 3rd and Main. Assault behind Station 4. Corporate fraud documents. Need photos. Maria checked her gear. Full batteries. Clear sightlines. Escape routes mapped. The girl they couldn't catch was still hunting, but something was different now. The city felt cleaner, lighter, more just. Her mother's voice echoed. Sometimes doing the right thing changes everything. She hadn't known how right those words would be. A year ago, she'd been invisible, powerless, afraid. Now she was none of those things. She'd become something else. A shadow of justice, a lens of truth, a voice for the voiceless. The sun set over her city. Her phones charged silently. Her network hummed with information. Tomorrow would bring new crimes to expose, new corruption to fight, new justice to serve. But tonight, Maria looked at the shelter bearing her name, at the people finding hope there, at the system slowly healing. She thought about that frightened girl who'd burst into a restaurant to save a kind man's life. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd learned that justice didn't need a name or a face. It just needed clear eyes, a steady hand, and the courage to keep watching. Click. The hunt would continue. The truth would keep flowing. The shadows would keep yielding their secrets. Because sometimes the smallest people cast the longest shadows. Sometimes the quietest voices spoke the loudest truth. Sometimes one girl with a camera could change everything. Maria checked her phones one last time. Full batteries, clear signals, ready for another night of justice, ready for another dawn. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to support us by leaving a like and subscribing to our Slices of Life channel. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which city are you talking about? It's very rewarding for us to provide our followers with an enjoyable moment. We appreciate the unconditional support you show us in every story. Blessings!